பட்டினி கிடந்து பசியால் மெலிந்து பாழ்பட நேர்ந்தாலும் எந்தன் கட்டுடல் வளைந்து கைகால் தளர்ந்து கவலை மிகுந்தாலும் பட்டினி கிடந்து பசியால் மெலிந்து பாழ்பட நேர்ந்தாலும் எந்தன் கட்டுடல் வளைந்து கைகால் தளர்ந்து கவலை மிகுந்தாலும் வாழ்வு கெட்டு நடுத்தெருவோடு கிடந்து கீழ்நிலையுற்றாலும் மன்னர் தொட்டு வளர்த்த தமிழ் மகளின் துயர் துடைக்க மறப்பேனா.
அடுத்ததாக அகவணக்கம். தமிழீழம் மண்ணுக்கு போரிலே நமது இன்னுயிரை ஈந்து அனைத்து மாவீரர்களுக்கும் இந்திய படைகளாலும் 2 காலம் கொலை செய்யப்பட்ட இலங்கை இராணுவத்தாலும் கொலை செய்யப்பட்ட பொதுமக்களுக்கு தலைவணங்கி அகவணக்கம் செலுத்துகிறோம்.
நோயிலிருந்து மயங்கி வளைந்து நுடங்கி விழுந்தாலும் ஓலை வாயில் நெளிந்து மரணம் அடைந்து பாடையில் ஊர்ந்தாலும் நோயிலிருந்து மயங்கி வளைந்து
பெரியோரே வருக வருக வணக்கம்.
என்பது இனி இல்லை. தாயே உனக்காய் உயிர் கொடுப்போம், உலகினில் நமக்கென நாடமைப்போம். தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க, மண்ணே வாழ்க, ஈழ மண்ணே வாழ்க. தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க, மண்ணே வாழ்க, ஈழ மண்ணே வாழ்க. நகரும் படைகள் போர் முடிக்கும், நாளைய சந்ததி நம்மை படிக்கும். வீசும் காற்றில் கொடி பறக்கும், விடுதலை தாகம் வார்ப்பிழக்கும். நகரும் படைகள் போர் முடிக்கும், நாளைய சந்ததி நம்மை படிக்கும். வீசும் காற்றில் கொடி பறக்கும், விடுதலை தாகம் வார்ப்பிழக்கும். மக்கள் சேனையும் பக்கம், விடுதலை வெற்றியும் பக்கம். வீழ்ந்த வீரன் நினைவுடனே வெற்றியை படைப்போம் வெகு விரைவில். தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க, மண்ணே வாழ்க, ஈழ மண்ணே வாழ்க. தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க, மண்ணே வாழ்க, ஈழ மண்ணே வாழ்க. உயிராய் வாழும் தாய் மண்ணேயும் ஆத்மம் கலந்த தமிழ் மண்ணே, தலைவன் பிறந்தான் உன் கருவில், தாயகம் வெடியும் வெகு விரைவில். உயிராய் வாழும் தாய் மண்ணேயும் ஆத்மம் கலந்த தமிழ் மண்ணே, தலைவன் பிறந்தான் உன் கருவில், தாயகம் வெடியும் வெகு விரைவில். அழுகை என்பது இனி இல்லை, அடிமை என்பது இனி இல்லை. தாயே உனக்காய் உயிர் கொடுப்போம், உலகினில் நமக்கென நாடமைப்போம். தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க, மண்ணே வாழ்க, ஈழ மண்ணே வாழ்க. தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க, மண்ணே வாழ்க, ஈழ மண்ணே வாழ்க. தமிழே வாழ்க, தமிழ் அன்னையே வாழ்க.
நன்றி கலைக்கோயில் Academy of Fine Arts, Vanitha Kulendran, director, and giving this chance for us to see this nice dance. Next, I like to call upon Mr. David Mather. He is our special consultant for a long time. He is with us with the TGTE, and David Mather is a senior legal counsel of Binal Birth Canada, and he has maintained a private practice in refugee, immigration and human rights law since 1979. He has published various books and manuscripts and currently resides in Winnipeg. Please welcome Mr. Mather. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I apologize for not being able to stay for all of your deliberations. I have a flight at 1:30 this afternoon to go to Japan, so I'm going to have to rush off as soon as I'm finished here, and I express my regrets in advance. I'm talking about Sri Lankan Tamil refugees, and this population presents a problem in terms of getting solutions to their situations, which is large, and to the general public, I would say, is unknown. There are hundreds of thousands of Sri Lankan Tamil refugees around the world in over 50 countries without permanent solutions to their plight. There are several reasons why there is not general public awareness of the situation. One is the long-standing nature of the problem. The refugee outflow from Sri Lanka has gone on for decades, since the start of the Civil War in 1983. It's a lot easier to get public attention to something which is new and different than something which is old and long-standing. The media report what is new today, not what was the same, what is the same today as yesterday. Second, and related, is the intractable nature of the problem. If easy solutions were at hand and were at least in part being implemented, the very implementation, even if partial, might attract public attention. However, Here, regrettably, that is not the situation. We are not inching towards a solution, far from it. We're in a state of stasis. People do not pay attention because they see no change. Third, the world is overwhelmed by refugee problems. If the Sri Lankan Tamil refugee problem were the world's only refugee problem, the community directed to refugee concerns, at least that community, would focus on this population. However, that is far from the case. There are so many refugees today and so limited willingness to provide solutions that this population is pushed to the side. New problems crowd out old. Compassion fatigue sets in. Those in urgent, immediate danger absorb all of the attention to the virtual exclusion of those with long-standing problems. Fourth, to the uninformed, the problems of this population have ceased to exist because the civil war is over and they can, to the uninformed, all go home. This is far from the case. Here, perception and reality diverge. The Civil War was an easily visible public event. The international displacement, the internal displacement of this population, the cumulative harassment and discrimination within Sri Lanka against this population, the repression of anyone even remotely suspected of an association with the LTTE, the refusal to return seized properties, the continuation of military rule and abuse in the north, the torture of suspects, the denial of freedom of expression for the right to determination of the Tamil people, and the impunity for perpetrators are all a good deal less visible abroad than the Civil War was. The government of Sri Lanka could not deny the Civil War. They can and do deny the abuse they are now committing against the Tamil people within Sri Lanka. There are three basic solutions to any refugee problem: repatriation, local integration, and resettlement. For this population, as indeed for any refugee population, all should be pursued. The absence of public attention makes pursuit of solutions more difficult. Public figures give the issue less attention when the public itself does so. Nonetheless, pursuit of solutions become itself a vehicle for public awareness. As we pursue solutions, we must try to publicize as much as possible our pursuit. As for repatriation, that is dependent upon an end to the human rights problems which cause the population to flee and prevents them from wanting to return. There are many reasons why respect for human rights should be promoted. Not least, in the Sri Lankan context, is the need to set in place preconditions for return of the Sri Lankan Tamil refugee population to Sri Lanka. Without being comprehensive or conclusive, I would suggest these preconditions. There needs to be a solution to the plight of the internally displaced within Sri Lanka, including restitution of property seized and compensation for loss of property and damage to property. There needs to be an end to impunity for the perpetrators of grave violation of human rights. There should be a repeal of the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution of Sri Lanka, which prevents free expression of the right to self-determination of the Tamil people. There needs to be standards and effective mechanisms to prevent discrimination against minority, religious, and ethnic populations generally. There needs to be an end to military rule in the north. There should be a revocation of the emergency measures in place. When it comes to interrogation of suspects, they should occur only in the presence of their counsel. And there should also be recognition that the LTTE during the Civil War was the effective government of the North and East, and that the mere association with this former government is not in itself grounds for suspicion or concern. When it comes to local integration, we need to proceed country by country. Each country presents its own problems and its own solutions. For India and Malaysia, with large local Tamil populations as well as large Sri Lankan Tamil refugee populations, local integration is an obvious solution. I've been to these two countries several times in the last few years to pursue this solution, and am returning with Sam Ratna this March to continue this work. For Thailand and Indonesia, resettlement abroad is in the long term a more practical solution. Yet in the short term, a good deal can be done to alleviate the situation of Sri Lankan Tamil refugees there. They should not be arbitrarily detained. They should have access to work. The children should have access to schooling. Medical care should be available. They should be provided with identity cards. They need interpreters to interact with local officials, and so on. Resettlement solutions are twofold. One has to do with the Office of the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, or the UNHCR. The UNHCR needs to be kept up to date about the situation in Sri Lanka, why it is unrealistic to expect the bulk of the Sri Lankan Tamil refugee population to return in the short run, and to keep them up to date about the need for resettlement. As for the resettlement places themselves, we have to go to the countries of resettlement to make resettlement requests to the UNHCR for this population. The UNHCR is more than happy to meet resettlement requests when they are made. For the UNHCR, the primary obstacle to resettlement is insufficient willingness to resettle from resettlement countries. Resettlement itself is not a once-for-all solution. Even once refugees arrive in resettlement countries, they need to be welcomed and locally integrated. Otherwise, they will attempt to move on, as I have seen in some countries, including Brazil. The work of resettlement is a continuing effort until the refugees feel at home in the country of resettlement. The effort of resettlement, too, is a country-by-country effort. First, attempt to get countries to make resettlement requests for this population to the UNHCR, and second, once they arrive, helping in their actual resettlement. This is, for Canada, an effort we can make right here in Canada. Because the local Tamil population is large, local support is good, but not everywhere. There needs to be outreach so that resettling Tamil refugees can locally integrate everywhere in Canada and not just in the large population centers. As well, Canada, like every other country, must give some places for these resettlement places for these cases. One facet of the Canadian resettlement system, which is good and virtually unique, is the possibility of private sponsorship. The government, though, has put a cap on private sponsorship of settlement agreement holders. The government has also made community and group of 5 sponsorships difficult to process. These government efforts have frustrated the generosity of Canadians and put obstacles in the way of those willing to help. The government needs to uncap the cap on private sponsorship of settlement agreement holders and facilitate community and group of 5 sponsorships. Well, I mean, there's a lot more I can say, and indeed I have said, which you can find on the website of the NGO ITRAN, the International Tamil Refugee Assistance Network, an NGO in which Sam Rattan and I have been working. And if you want more information about the specific countries and what could be done in each of them, I invite you to read through the material posted there. I do have a couple of minutes left, and I invite any questions that you might have, and thank you for your attention.
யாராவது கேள்வி கேட்க விரும்பினால் ஓகே.
Indonesia, the refugees have got issues because most of them don't know because of the language problem and other things. They couldn't, that is what they told me, that they couldn't fill up the forms and other things, and that is the reason they are kept in the jail and other places and get the recognition. Really, they are the people who are really affected, but unfortunately, they didn't have the means. So, what we can do, in your expert opinion, can we help them in any way?
Well, yes. I mean, as I said, I've been to Indonesia a couple of times, and one time I met some people actually in detention at a remote location. And then I went to Jakarta and I met with the government. I said, I don't think these people should be in detention. And they released them. I mean, presumably not just because I asked, but because they really shouldn't have been in detention. They do have a bizarre system there, though, that people go through detention in order to go into the refugee determination system. So people will report for detention so that they can make refugee claims. And I think that's an odd system and should change. But it's got to do with the way they're funneled through the bureaucracy there. But in addition, they are detaining boat people who are being captured on their way to Australia, and they're being kept for longer. So that's a more severe problem. There's also, of course, as you mentioned, the problem with interpreters, and there needs to be more interpreters in place. There's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding. There's also a bizarre phenomenon of boat people actually going from India or Malaysia to Indonesia, which really shouldn't be happening because there are Tamil populations in those countries and there aren't in Indonesia, and they could be able to locally integrate in India and Malaysia, and they can't in Indonesia. And it's a testament to the difficulties that these populations are having locally integrating in Malaysia and India, that they take boats to Indonesia. And the reason they're doing that is that, first of all, Australia gives money to the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, to provide support to these people in Indonesia, and it doesn't do that for Malaysia and India. And so you've got that support. Secondly, I mean, the UNHCR recognizes that these people cannot locally integrate, and so they do try to resettle at least some of them. So it becomes an avenue for resettlement. But the attitude of the UNHCR, which is kind of my attitude as well, which is, you know, why should we be resettling from India or Malaysia? Malaysia's a well-developed country. It's got a big Tamil population. There's 1,000 Tamil schools there who need students, and the Sri Lankan Tamil refugee population cannot go to those schools. I mean, the situation is just bizarre. There's similar problems in India where, I mean, the people in Delhi blame the Sri Lankan Tamil refugee population in Tamil Nadu for the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, which, I mean, they weren't all guilty of it, so, but it's become an obstacle itself. And so I mean, there are problems in Indonesia, sure, but I think they're regional problems, and one of the things we need to do is focus on solving this problem regionally. Because, you know, if you solve all the problems in Indonesia and everybody gets resettled and nobody's in jail, then you're going to start getting more movement of people from Malaysia and India to Indonesia, which it doesn't really overall solve the problem.
Thank you. And one more question from Ilavindanaya.
Excuse me. Though there is a change of government, there is no fundamental change in the thinking. We are facing cultural genocide, physical liquidation, and economic strangulation for the last 60 odd years. You are doing your best is not to be questioned. Bird bodies is a hackneyed phrase. They think of the geopolitical interest. There may be fine bird powers want to keep this government in power for their own welfare or whatever. So how do we find the solution? To draw world attention. Any delay of justice is denial of justice. Unless people of your caliber come to our rescue, we feel that we may face what is called lingering death. Please come to our rescue and expand your thinking on this vital issue, the crucial issue where we are facing death every day. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I share your analysis. Basically, the end of the Civil War put Sri Lanka back in the position it was at the beginning of the Civil War. I mean, what precipitated the Civil War was this ongoing harassment, discrimination, and persecution of the Tamil population. The end of the Civil War hasn't ended that problem. In fact, it just brought us back to, as I say, where the country was before. There is some promise, I think, through the UN Human Rights Council, because there have been, they have been engaged with this issue, and they have been pushing this issue. Unfortunately, we're caught right now in the problem with the Trump administration drawing globally from concerns with human rights. The US, at the UN Human Rights Council, had been pushing the Sri Lankan agenda, and I'm not confident they're going to continue to do that now, but other countries could do so, because there does seem to be the votes there, and there seems to be the willingness there. I mean, there's an acknowledgement that the internal report about what went on at the end of the Civil War was a whitewash, and that the UN basically has to take up the issue. I would say generally about human rights, including in this area, there's no kind of button you press and everything's immediately solved. It's just awareness, communication, going everywhere, telling everyone, getting out the message as consistently as possible. But I would say that dealing with the refugee issue is a way of dealing with the problem, because getting the point out that these people cannot go home is a way of pointing out the problems in Sri Lanka, setting out preconditions for, as I did there, about what needs to happen to allow them to go home. It is a vehicle for advocating change in Sri Lanka, and I think that that's one thing that people who are concerned about what's going on in Sri Lanka can usefully do, because the refugees are everywhere. I mean, the refugees by definition are outside of Sri Lanka, and everywhere a refugee is becomes a location that has a justification for being concerned about Sri Lankan human rights abuse, because the human rights abuse ceased to be just in Sri Lanka. They are here in Canada, they are everywhere the Sri Lankan refugees are, and so I would suggest using that as a vehicle for dealing with the problem.
So you said dealing with refugees dealing with problem. Then how Canada was able to settle more than 300,000 tons?
Well, I mean, during the Civil War, it was a different situation. The Civil War, as I said, was a lot more visible. People could see the problem then. The problem is dealing with the population since the end of the Civil War. I don't think we can, and I don't think we would want to recreate the Civil War situation. The question is the refugee population is there, but the visibility of the problem this population faces isn't there because the Civil War is gone. So I don't think we can say, well, we did it before, we can do it now, because we did it before in a different context. I think we have to shift to a new context and deal with that context and say, Civil War is gone, the problem isn't gone, and you still have to deal with it. And the way I would do it, I mean, a lot of the sponsorship in Canada was government assisted. And the government assisted now is going to cases where the UNHCR has vulnerable population priorities. I would say the way to do it now in Canada is through the private sponsorship system, the Group of Five, the community sponsorship. The trouble is, those systems aren't working. So I would say the way to do it now is in Canada is to get those systems working. And that's what I think the focus should be.
Thank you, David Mehta. This is actually you have to be tensed because your flight is on 1:30 and you are here, and I like your relaxed nature, though you have this flight. And I'm sure we all can learn more, because this is a very strong issue that Sri Lankan refugees, almost 56 different countries we have, and we have to think more practical steps. How are we going to resolve our refugees issues? Hopefully, with the support of Mr. David Mehta and more other experts, we have to find some practical steps. Thank you very much, David.